fortunate to introduce Craig on my radio program and in person. I learn a number of things every time he comes up and shares his life experience. And I think like no other night, tonight, I'm ready to hear what he has to say, and I hope you are as well. Please let me introduce my good friend Craig.
Frank said you'd rather be watching Sex in the City. Is that a TV show? Okay. I thought he meant literally. Some of you heard about the skirmish. Frank may have mentioned it. I just want to tell you something. I've had approximately 10 talk show hosts fired because they wouldn't stop interviewing me. Mike Siegel got fired in Seattle, Ralph Steadman in Portland, Roger Fredenberg, there's a half dozen more. A couple of radio stations got bomb threats that if they didn't stop interviewing me, they would bomb the station. People have been arrested that have shown up at peaceful protest marches. They've been arrested, fingerprinted, booked, indicted, convicted, and they're going to jail. This is America. I got an email that said this. He read a paper that's on my website called The Future of America Under the American-Led Empire, A Realistic Sense of It. This guy wrote me a letter. I've got more than one of these, but this is the one I thought was the most important. It says, "Hi, the future of America depends on America. We can know this by looking at the Bible and how God blessed his people when they obeyed his laws and when they did not obey his laws. In our present situation of following secular humanism, abortion on demand, and God out of our schools and public square, we are in for God's judgment. Will we repent and be led back to God by our leaders? If not, America has a very short future as world leader." How many of you have actually come to one of these talks of mine? Please raise your hand. How many of you have not? This is the first time. Well, it's about 50-50. Maybe more of you haven't. That's usually about right. It's hard for people to come back after they've heard me once. One woman that called on Frank's show and said some things to me, and I didn't pay much attention to her. I kind of blew her off, and Frank was delicate and bumped her with the mute button. She disappeared, but she's called more than once. She called Kathy. And this last couple of times she called Kathy had to explain to her that she really needed to do it. Why does this feel like I'm in the Navy? She started browbeating Kathy about my attitude and my style on the radio, that I was rude and nasty and mean, and if I had changed my behavior, I would appeal to a larger audience. Well, it turns out that this woman that was calling on Frank's show is a Christian woman, and she has a problem with my style, and she wants to come to one of my lectures, because she also made it clear to Kathy that one of the problems that I was having in attracting large audiences and respect for my work is my bad language, that I do cuss and swear sometimes. Now, those of you that have been to my lectures in the past, I have, and, Kathy and I talked about it, and I thought for a bit, and I thought, well, Fred here probably would like me to repent. My swearing, he doesn't know anything else about me that I should need to repent about, but probably my swearing would be included. And Kathy said, the Christian following of George Bush, this isn't my audience. That's not who I want to talk to. I don't want to talk to the Christian fundamentalists and the evangelicals that support Bush. I'm not anti-Christian. Some of my clients are Christians. I'm not anti-Buddhist. I'm not anti-atheist. I'm not anti-anything. All of you pretty much that have followed me on Frank's show at least, and if you follow me for any time, you know my only philosophy of life is rather Nietzschean and agnostic, and basically I mind my own business, so why don't you? And that includes my language and how I talk and how I act. So for this woman to call and say, you know, you got to settle down and not be so rude, understand what I mean by this. Fuck you. I'm only interested in talking to people who are mature, grown up, sensible, reasonably intelligent. I'm not looking for a room full of Einsteins because then I wouldn't want to be speaking. I'm looking for a room not unlike the rooms I've had in this hotel for the last 3 lectures. This is the audience I want to talk to, those of you that have the stomach for me, not John Kerry and George Bush. I don't think, you know, I might be wrong, but I'll go ahead and I'll try this out. How many of you are absolutely certain that George Bush is going to save us from terrorism and he's the best president? So I didn't think that would happen. How many of you actually think, and I added the word actually because I want to make it clear my position, how many of you think Kerry will do a whole lot different than George Bush? So then why would I clean up my act? I'm talking to precisely the audience I want to talk to. You're not party men. And you're not a bunch of feminists or lesbians, so you're not going to be upset that I said party men instead of party people. Because you'll understand that the term party men is a linguistic terminology and a phraseology that exists in language since the dawn of time. It's a masculine and feminine. And that has nothing to do with where I'm talking about men or women. Party men include women. If you belong to a party, in my opinion, and of course this is going to be strong words, in my opinion, you are my enemy. If you belong to the Bolshevik Party, the Fascist Party, the Nazi Party, the Catholic Party, the Republican Party, the Party of God, which is called Hezbollah, or the New Party of God, which is the American Republican Party, which is our new Hezbollah. If you belong to a party, I have no use for you. Now, I don't hate you. I'm not going to shoot you. I don't hate you. But I really wish you'd go really far away now. To not have any use for party men, if we didn't live by such a structure, a 2-party structure, not a 3 or a 4 or a 5 or a 6 or a 7 or an 8-party structure, like they have in new democracies throughout the world and old ones. If we didn't live in a 2-party system, CNN and Fox would not exist as they do today. What I do, because I watch television, I came to the hotel late last night, I watched CNN and Fox, and I woke up this morning, and I stayed in bed like an invalid for 6 hours, and I watched CNN and Fox. I didn't say anything, I didn't comment, I didn't talk back at the television, I didn't slap my forehead and say, oy vey, every time it happened. I sat and I watched it to absorb it and see what it is you guys watch. You watch it. Why? There's not one fundamental reason to watch CNN or Fox television. Period. There's no reason. Even when they do try to attempt, like Crossfire did, to sound like they were debating the issues, they weren't. They were entertaining your mind away from politics and into bullshit. You weren't hearing a debate about the issues. Not one part of these programs are about the issues that matter. And when they did show up with a fact or two, occasionally a fact or two, it was so distorted from the reality, from what's really going on. In Iraq, for instance, 208 Iraqis are dying every week in Iraq right now. They're not saying that. On the news, they say the Marines killed 1 insurgent. And there might have been a few civilian casualties. Look, I'm just going to tell you something. Before this thing is over, if Bush is reelected and he stays the course, if Kerry is elected, he will also have to stay the course. Do you think Russia, Germany, France, Indonesia, Malaysia, all the countries that have opposed this war, and Afghanistan, do you think they're suddenly going to throw in and send troops to Iraq and support American troops because Kerry is now our president? No, this is about their people. The French aren't going to send Frenchmen to die while we, Americans, are still occupying a country we illegally invaded. So Kerry can't change it. He can't. And he's endorsed increasing the size of the army by 40,000. Who's he talking about? Who's going to enlist? David Hackworth just wrote an article that I sent to all my clients, and I hope some of you caught it, where he just flat said, we're not just short of troops. We simply don't have troops at this point. All 9 divisions of our 10, 9 are deployed. It's finished. The only way they can deploy more troops in the future and stay in Iraq is with the draft. They're both liars. Kerry will institute the draft. Bush will institute the draft. Both of them will do it, and they'll say that it's under pressure of world opinion, the war, and if you're against it, you know what you're going to be told you're against? Your American brothers and sisters dying in Iraq. You'll be unpatriotic because they'll be dying for nothing to serve their country, and you're cynical and you don't give a damn. It's going to be very tough on you to avoid the draft if you're 18 to 26, whether you're in school or not. It's going to be really hard. As far as I can tell, what research I've gotten through, there are 3 countries that would extradite an American citizen that goes to their country and asks for refugee or asylum status as a conscientious objector to avoid the draft. There's 3 countries you can go to that I know of. It's not Canada and it's not Mexico. All the trade agreements and NAFTA, all of those agreements have changed all that. You go to Canada, you will be extradited to America and you will go to jail for 5 years in a federal penitentiary like an accused homicide. Not county lockup. Federal prison, 5 years. No chance of parole, no probation, nothing. The draft comes under national security. You will get the full extent of the law, and they will find you. The FBI looks for you, not sheriffs, not marshals. The 3 countries, and by the way, those of you that come to my lectures and you expect good news, Frank already made it pretty clear, you don't get that here, okay? If I had good news, I'd have a party. We'd all get shit-faced. Some of you probably thought I meant a party like I'd start a Hewlett party, like the Republican. No. We'd all just get shit-faced and high and party our asses off. I ain't got no good news. You're not going to get out of this. This is what happens to countries when they don't give a damn and they don't vote and they don't read. Nigeria, Ghana, and Seychelles are the 3 countries you can run and flee to. Now, if you're a former white Christian fundamentalist evangelical Republican, blonde-haired and blue-eyed, I would suggest go ahead and going to Folsom Prison. You'll be better off. One of the things we've gotten in the mail, one of the approaches we've gotten from people about my work when they do read it, has been from the Christian evangelicals. That they actually think by sending me Bible verses and scripture that this is going to fundamentally change my political secular views. Well, one of them argued that what Bush is doing may be a crusade because the book of Revelations basically dictates it, that we must do it. We must save Israel, we must go to war in the Middle East, we must bring about the apocalypse, and we must defend Christendom. And I said this in French, so those of you that heard it the last interview, you heard me say it, but now I'll say it for those that didn't. American Christians do not represent Christendom. Almost a third or more of the entire world are practicing Christians. I don't know how good they're getting at it by practicing so much, but they aren't supposed to be practicing really hard to be good Christians. England, Italy, Spain, Georgia, Azerbaijan has a huge population of Christians. The whole world of of Christianity has opposed America in Iraq. Even England is about to impeach Tony Blair, a Christian nation. So Christians have got to, this is your argument when you meet a Christian and they say that this is what's going on, that we as Christians, as a Christian nation, are defending the very basis of Christian civilization. Christian civilization has opposed Bush from day one. They oppose us now. So to suggest that somehow 60 million fundamentalist American Christians and Pat Robertson represent Christianity is raw, unadulterated, and I don't know why no one will be willing to say this on CNN or Fox, is raw, unadulterated bullshit. We do not represent anything, as far as I can tell, except an incredible amount of hubris, angst, nihilism, violence, and brutality. That's what America looks like to the rest of the world, and that's what it looks like to me right now. And I'm not a pacifist. I'm not a Buddhist. I wouldn't know what to do with myself if I was. To be honest with you, I'd have to give up all kinds of things, including cussing and swearing. I'm going to give you a short, very short history lesson. This country, around 1913, was fundamentally changed for all time. The ideas behind that change began before the turn of the century. In 1913, everything began to be changed legally. We got the IRS, we got tax-exempt foundations, we got new corporate structure laws for taxation, we got the Federal Reserve System, currency was now issued by a private for-profit banking system called the Federal Reserve. It was taken out of the hands of Congress and the Treasury. The whole world changed, all right around Christmas Eve, 1913. Then every year after that, around Christmas Eve of each year, Congress changed the laws again and again. This is when it started. This is also what started a lot of the really crackpot conspiracy theories that Frank mentioned a little bit ago that still persist in America. Because Americans can only think. When I say this in general, when I say Americans, I assume most of you already understand I'm not necessarily speaking about you. If I say all Americans are illiterate, stupid dolts, don't sit there in the audience and go, well, that's not true, I'm not. Because you've just identified yourself as an arrogant, stupid dolt. So then I am talking about you. So try not to react to me saying this, because I'm probably talking about you. Because you are stupid then. Americans are stupid, not ignorant. Not just ignorant. Ignorant is something that's amenable. It's subject to change. You can give them a book, teach them how to read and write, and they can actually become functioning human beings after a certain period of time. Well, by and large, that's not happening in America. Americans basically are stupid. They don't want to learn because they don't want out of their ignorance. It is true, ignorance is bliss. Look at the Christian Republican conservatives. They think George Bush is a good man, a good Christian man. Now, if that's not ignorance, I don't know what is. There's nothing about this man that resembles anything in the nature of good. I don't see it. I'm getting old, like George Carlin said. Actually, I'm not getting old. I am old. So, I've learned something doing this for 25 years and being self-employed or in the military for 35 years. I have learned something since getting past the age of 18 about men and women of my country. I can't say the same thing about Iraqi or Iranian men and women. I can't say that about an Azerbaijani. I can't necessarily say I know human nature that well. But my American colleagues, citizens, compatriots, I do know them. And the American people are one of the most arrogant, rude, loudmouth, ill-humbled, hubris, bearing assholes on the planet. We are the worst people on earth right now, and I hope you understand that I'm not necessarily speaking of you personally. But if you reacted, if it hit you in your gut what I just said, then I am talking about you. Because you should have simply just went, well, yeah, I agree. When I said that, you should already have done it. I don't care if you're 16 or 70. You should already know it. The American people on planet Earth today are the biggest assholes on the planet. I know from a lot of reasons. The last over a decade, I live in a resort area on an Indian reservation, a lake area where people come to vacation, dressed in their big old shorts and flowery colored shirts and jewelry and very large, brightly colored vehicles that they don't want to get wet. And of course, where I live is called a rainforest. So it's interesting to see these people who want to come to an old growth rainforest, but they don't want their new car to get wet, so they don't go anywhere. They park it and they stay in the hotels until the rain stops. Then they go out and dry the car out and drive around. For the locals who drive old beat up trucks and Jeeps, so we'll see them in their vehicles and we're supposed to envy them. We're supposed to see them go by and go, my, they must be wealthy. We're supposed to, as pilgrims, as the primitives that live out there, we're supposed to look at these pilgrims that come to visit with awe and reverence. The way Americans go to France or Germany or Nigeria. The whole world is supposed to look at the great Americans in awe and reverence. That's why they throw their money around, snap their fingers at waitresses. That's why we're considered rude and loudmouth. We are. Well, now, given what George Bush has done, and what this country has done throughout the world for the last 75 years, this process of globalization and multinational institutions and the corporate structure and the trade agreements, does it really shock anybody that the whole world is beginning to hate us and that terrorism is coming to our shores? I'm not going to say we deserve it. Nobody deserves to die in that sense. But I'm only saying nobody deserves to die in that sense so I can be reasonably politically correct in this dissertation if somebody listens to it from the other side of the aisle. But in a certain sense, this will be taken out of context, I'm sure. Yes, we deserve it. Do you have any idea what we're doing to their countries, to their cultures, to their children, to their lives? We're taking out entire families in Iraq, claiming that we thought a terrorist group might be having a meeting in a suburban home. We don't go in with SWAT teams. We don't go in with Navy SEALs. We don't go in with Spec Ops. We don't go in at all. From a distance, we launch missiles at them, and we take out the whole building and kill everybody inside. And then you don't hear about it, because the only place it gets reported is in the Arab and the foreign press, the Italian press. Sometimes in English, you can find these stories, because they interview every single day in Iraq the doctors that work at the hospitals that care for the people that come in. And that's where these numbers come from. Entire families are wiped off the face of the earth. Rumsfeld said that it was absurd that we would have a draft, and that in fact, we were pulling troops out of Iraq already. You just weren't aware of it. He said there was 160,000 troops there 6 or 8 months ago, and there's only about 135,000 there now, which corresponds precisely to the number of American soldiers killed, severely wounded, or sent home, or deserted. So when he says that we brought the number down from 160 to 130,000, he's talking about 1,000 dead guys, 8,000 guys with no legs and half a head missing, and the rest of them are in hospitals in Germany or America. He hasn't brought any troops home. The Iraqis have sent them home. The Iraqi insurgency is sending our troops home, not Rumsfeld and not Bush. And I'm just going to say this, because again, Frank understands me. The last interview I did on Frank's show, if you were listening, Frank always asked me if I want to close and want to say one last thing. So I test Frank sometimes. I say things on Frank's show that, you probably shouldn't say on Bill O'Reilly. And I closed the last interview, and I said, I have one last thing to say. George Bush, send the troops home, you son of a bitch. And I wondered if Frank hit the mute button. And I guess he didn't. And that's why the station started getting emails and phone calls about having me on the air. And that's why I wasn't on the air on the 18th that we scheduled, and we canceled it. Now, whether or not Frank and I get together and we do any interviews after this, I know that it's subject to a great deal of vagaries. A great deal of things can take place. I can be gotten rid of in the public sphere real easy. And it doesn't have to be a little black book coming down from Dick Cheney's office. One person can make a phone call to that radio station, raise enough of a stink, call a couple of advertisers, send an email to the ad department at KLOS, and the station, as a for-profit multinational corporation, is going to do what? Solve their problem. The easiest, most efficient way. First they'll say, Frank, get him off the air. And Frank will say yes or no. If Frank says no, they fire Frank. And if Tracy says, I don't like this, they fire Tracy. This is the media, American media. They don't have to put up with anything from anybody. There's only 9 major corporations left on earth that own 80 or 90% of everything you hear, see, read, and listen to. Radio, television, newspaper, magazines. In another 10 years, there will only be 5 or 6. Where's the competition? So if every single one of you were to email KLOS and demand that Frank be rehired and me be put on the air, would that have any effect on him? No. No, it won't. So I'm not going to plead with you to do anything. I told my clients, don't do anything. And I've said this about Frank for years. Frank's put me on the air. I'm grateful. Bullshit, you're grateful. That's nonsense, Frank. I'm grateful. Without you, none of these people and thousands, if not millions of others, would know who the hell Craig Hewlett is. They'd think it's a nephew of Hewlett-Packard. It's only been Frank's willingness to put me on the air. And don't get me wrong, I've been on over 10, 12, 15,000 hours and over 300 hosts nationwide. But you haven't heard me all over the country in the last 4 years. That's when it began. It began with the militia movement, but it began even before that. But when George Bush Jr. got elected, I knew my days in the media were finished. Now this isn't a brag because it isn't anything to be unbelievably proud of, but do you think after me doing this all the way back to Reagan and Bush Sr., doing Arsenio Hall, trashing George Bush Sr. on Arsenio Hall live, do you actually think the Bush family doesn't know who I am? And they don't have a little push to keep me out of the media? Look, one of these days, I have a client base. I now have approximately 30 clients. I have a client base, everything from bankers to musicians, truck drivers, and businessmen. All kinds of different people. And I told them this. This is how I give them advice, for instance, about a certain subject. If they're doing something, like, for instance, if they play in a band, I tell them, what you need to do as a musician is find 3 more bands to play with right now. And then when you get 3 more bands to play with, find 3 more. Because whoever you're playing with, whatever band it is, I don't care who it is, it's not permanent. Frank Sontag is not permanent. I'm not permanent. We're not permanent. And to finally make the point to one musician who was playing with a band, he played with them for a long time, to convince him, I said, the band leader is either going to fire you, and I still wasn't quite getting through. So I said, all right, let me put it differently. The band you're playing with right now, the band leader, the guy that hired you, he's going to die, and you're going to have to go find work somewhere else. Now, that's how I think, because I think as a self-employed, former ex-military, self-employed my entire life, even when I did some things with the military, I was self-employed. When you're self-employed, it's the same thing as being unemployed. It's the same thing as being unemployed. If you're self-employed, you own the company, you're unemployed. Every day you get up, you got to start over again to make sure your business stays afloat, or you personally. So I don't think about things. In my background, having been originally military, I think of things not tactically, but strategically. I look at my country the same way. I look at it as a worst-case scenario, and I say, make adjustments to it now. Start thinking about it now, because it's going to occur. The worst will occur. It's inevitable. It may take longer. It might not happen next year. We might not have a military draft by June of next year. But you ignore it at your own peril. They're not going to draft me. They don't want me back in the military. They almost court-martialed me twice when I was there. They have no use for me. They have a use for a whole bunch of you, including you that are female, because the new draft legislation already includes women 18 to 26. The deferment for college, forget it. You don't get one anymore. If you're a senior and you're about to graduate, they will let you finish the semester and then take you. It's also been proposed that they're going to target industry needs. Computer skills, language skills, medical skills, emergency and medical, nursing, the things that they need to fight wars in the new day. You will not get a deferment. I don't care if you've got heart palpitations, nerve damage, flat feet, a bad back, and you're a little bit stupid. The Army has a use for you. Trust me. I don't care if you're damn near dead. They've got a use for you. The Army is not like anything else on earth. It's not like a multinational corporation. They need what they refer to as grunts. That's why they call them grunts. That's all you are, and that's all you do. Now, I'm not even anti-military. I'm not a peacenik. I'm not a pacifist. I don't hate the military. I've said this since September 11th, the first lecture I ever gave after 9/11. I said, even when I did interviews, I'm not a pacifist. I'm not anti-military. If this country were invaded, I would put my hand up first and help train Wayne's World to fight. Now, I grant you, I would probably fail in achieving my objective, but that's what I would do. I would try to help my country, and I would fight, because I look at this thing that we're doing in Iraq no differently than if it were happening to me in Quinault, where I live. I would not want a tank rolling down my street, people pouring out of trucks, invading my home, killing my children, raping my wife, looting what it is I do have left, and then if I object, putting a bullet in my face. I would put up one hell of a fight. It does not surprise me that the insurgency in Iraq has gone the way it has. I kept hearing this. This is what I kept hearing this morning for 6 hours on CNN. The Pentagon was not aware of at the time, and now they're admitting that the insurgency is much larger than they expected. How many of you believe the Pentagon thought the insurgency was only 2,000 or 3,000 dead-enders, Baathists, ex-Hussein people? Did anybody in this room believe that when they said it a year ago? See, I know they're lying. I was in the military. The military's not that stupid. Before we ever put a plane or a foot on Iraqi soil, we knew we'd be fighting a guerrilla war, long-term, maybe a generation, and we would be fighting not Osama bin Laden, who hated Saddam Hussein, not this mystical, I don't pronounce the name exactly correct, Zarqawi. I don't believe he exists. I read other reports, other Pentagon and Defense Department studies. They don't know who this man is. They're not sure they've got the spelling of the name right, and they're not sure what he looks like. To claim that he's behind the attacks, the Iraqi people are saying that's bullshit. There's no one in Fallujah that even looks like this or is doing what they're saying. He's a myth, but he's a very useful myth here in America, because it's supposed to convince you that the only reason there's not democracy in Iraq and that George Bush didn't achieve the objectives he set out to is that there's foreigners getting in the way of the Iraqi people putting flowers down the barrels of our M16s and seeing us as liberators. Foreigners are doing this. And I'm just going to tell you, David Hackworth, Colonel Bob Brown, everybody I've ever known, active or retired military, nobody believed it at the beginning, nobody believes it now, and all of them are saying what I'm saying. Bush, Rumsfeld are lying to you. They knew this would happen. It's chaos. They wanted chaos. How do you rebuild a culture? You reduce it to zero. It's called a tabula rasa. You start over with a blank slate. And that means a period of chaos is necessary. Or, as Friedrich Nietzsche would say, the period of fire and cleansing is necessary. Everyone that opposes Bush's regime have to die. All of them. Man, woman, and child. Not one of them can be allowed to run for office. They cannot form a party. They have to be isolated and exterminated. All of them. Now, of a nation this size, nobody believes it's going to take less than a generation. Do you understand what I'm saying? The course they've set? This isn't about Iraq. This is about the whole stinking Middle East. All of it. And yes, it's about Israel. It's about Israel. When it comes right down to it, if somebody needs to nuke Baghdad because our troops are being slaughtered, Israel will do it. I assure you, Israel will do it. We're up to our eyeballs in Mossad right now, in Iraq. I'll repeat something. You know, if you're not guilty, don't take offense. If you're watching Fox television ever again, if you watch CNN ever again after being in the room with me, I hope I don't ever recognize you on the street later. Because there's something really, really wrong with you. If you keep watching this crap on TV, nothing on that tube is going to tell you the truth. They can't. They don't want to. They want to get rich and famous, and they want you stupid. The only way you can control a country our size is that we are illiterate, stupid, uninformed. Now, they want you to know how to use a computer, because that'll advance technology, industry, and profits for the corporations. But at some point, and I've been telling my business clients this for over a decade, at some point, if Americans want jobs in the tech industry, they better learn a foreign language and be prepared to move to Indonesia, India, Malaysia, Pakistan, and in the end, China, or you won't have a job. Outsourcing hasn't even started yet. They're going to outsource everything. They have no use for Americans. Look, for 13 years, my largest clients as a private personal consultant to CEOs, presidents, and corporations were Weyerhaeuser, Exxon, U.S. Home, some of the largest corporations in the world. I sat in on board meetings. I was a contractor. I worked with these men. I got to know them. I went to lunch with them. They don't give a rat's ass about you as Americans. If you just came over to this country from a foreign country, learn this. You've come to the wrong country. You've come to the wrong country. You should have gone to China. If you are actually looking for liberty, freedom, and a future and prosperity with your job skills. China, India, Malaysia, not here. We were written off in 1913. The future was already written. They knew they were going to create the World Trade Organization. It started as GATT immediately after World War II. Now, did you actually think that nobody thought about it before World War II? That's all they did is think about it. The Journal of Foreign Affairs is published by the Council on Foreign Relations, a big bugaboo of the John Birch Society that's supposed to be part of the conspiracy to destroy America and take over the world. Now, the organization exists. The journal exists. It's called Foreign Affairs. I beg my clients to read it every quarter, cover to cover, and read it well. Because I'm going to write a paper on it, or I'm going to write a press release, and if you haven't read it, you're not going to understand what I've said anyways. So I constantly browbeat my clients to read this journal. It is an elitist journal. The council are elitists. Those men that made up the original foundation of it in 1923 have been on the leading edge of creating GATT, NAFTA, World Trade, Ex-Im Bank, United Nations. Everything that matters was thought out by a group of elitists. There's always a group of elitists. Always. Somebody's always going to be at the top. He's going to have colleagues at the top. And they're not going to like people like us at the bottom. We are at the bottom. Every single one of you in this room are at the bottom. I don't care what kind of money you think you make. You are at the rat's ass bottom of the pile. You're the bottom of the food chain. They're at the top and they don't give a damn about you. They call it corporatism. It has a name, always did. It's always had a name. It's always had an ideology. But what I find interesting for the John Birch Society to try to grasp in their mind is they think anybody who's a member or anybody that writes for the journal, anybody that advertises in the journal, is part of this vast conspiracy to destroy America. In the last two issues of Foreign Affairs, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, Pete Peterson, and a whole group in the latest issue, including Adam Siegel, Robert Tuchman, David Hendrickson, names you might not know, they were the elite of the elite. They were all involved in promoting the new world of GATT, NAFTA, trade, the World Trade Organization. They were in the beginnings during the Cold War. It was their dream as well. But their dream was specifically multilateral. Their dream was also specifically to benefit the American people. In the last two journals, these men have trashed George Bush. They even made sure that this new issue that doesn't come out until after the elections is already on their website. You can download the articles. And they're taking George Bush to task for all of this. Peterson said flat out, not only can we not win the war in Iraq, we can't win the war. We're not going to defeat a guerrilla insurgency of a nationalistic people fighting on their soil. It can't be done. We're not going to win the war. He said, but beyond that, we don't have the money. We don't have the money. George Bush is prepared, and others like him, like Kerry, are prepared to bankrupt America in behalf of the corporate structure. Bankrupt America, us as Americans, you, your children, your grandchildren, will never be able to pay off this debt. It's impossible. The numbers don't add up. Now, Peterson knows this well as an economist and trained and a CEO of many large corporations. But bankrupting us is not bankrupting America as empire. It's just bankrupting us as the people who have to bear the brunt of paying the taxes of empire. Now, if you're not following here, listen very carefully for those of you that are new to this. This is not an American empire. The left is wrong. Nader is wrong. Nader's always been wrong. I have hated Ralph Nader for 30 years. He's a liar. He's a fraud. He gets his living and his wealth. He's a multimillionaire because he owns stock in all the largest multinational corporations that his organization, Public Citizen, denounces as part of the American empire. He's rich because he owns stock and equity in those same corporations. Why did anybody ever listen to him? Why would you listen to him now? He's lying now. Because he's saying that the corporate structure is an American empire. The American corporate structure hasn't been American for 35 years. It's never been American in my own lifetime working with them. U.S. Home was 58% owned by French. George Bush Sr. sits on the board of directors and has for decades of 6 different German and French corporations. All you could think of is Halliburton. The world's much bigger than this little narrow view during a political season, and that's why you're confused about Bush and Kerry. That's why Nader doesn't make sense to you. If Nader is such a liberal leftist, why is he taking votes from Kerry, which will help Bush? Corporatism never implied America or you and I. It's called market saturation in corporate marketing lingo. They've already sold to America enough SUVs, Mercedes, big cars and trucks, big, white, bright, shiny basketball shoes. They've sold all they need to sell to Americans. They want to sell them to Chinese, Bulgarians, Ukrainians, Estonians, Nigerians. Now, if you look at this in an idealistic sense, which some of the elite always have, globalization, internationalism, all the words they used to use decades ago, always imply this utopian view that if we spread the market around, we could make every country like America, free, wealthy, and prosperous. Now, those idealists that thought that way, they don't think that way anymore. They know that what we have isn't any kind of a free market, free enterprise system. That doesn't exist. It never actually has. Every market is so regulated in the benefit of the largest corporations that produce a product in any given field. In other words, if you want to make light bulbs, you got to compete with General Electric. If you want to make a rifle and sell it to the military, you have to fight against Springfield and Colt. These corporations, in the end, are owned by companies like DuPont, Eli Lilly, IT&T. General Electric is a monolithic corporation. This process of these corporations getting larger, more cartelized, more concentrated, collectivized, whatever word you think you understand this. They hate competition. General Electric and Chase Manhattan Bank have as their best friends any kind of a regime that's socialist. They have no use for free enterprise. And they have no use for you or a labor union that benefits workers. And I hate using that word because it makes me immediately sound like Karl Marx. But there is no other word. Because we're all workers. I don't care if you're self-employed. You're just your own worker. You're just working for yourself as an employee. And if you don't believe me, ask somebody self-employed. Every self-employed person pays twice for Social Security. Withholding. They pay twice. Once for being self-employed, and the second one for being employed by the self-employed person of themselves. So if you think we live in a free enterprise system and that this future that Bush and Kerry and the rest of them talk to us about is even reality, it is not. Your reality is what the future is. Not my perception of the future. The way it actually is turning out to be true after me writing and talking and yelling and screaming, cursing and stamping my feet for 30 years. It's coming out exactly as I delineated it. One day, and today, right now, of the 100 largest corporations in the world, of the 100 largest corporations in the world, of the 100 largest economies of the world, of the 100 largest economies of the world, America being the largest economy, of the 100 largest economies, 51 are now multinational corporations. In another 20 years, it'll be 20. At some point, the idea of this empire is that the corporations will, in fact, adjudicate democracy. You will find your liberty, your freedom, your wants, your needs, your work, your security, your pension, medical, your life, your future, by working for one of the corporations. You will vote through interest groups for your rights, whatever they might be. But they will be interest groups that vote, not you. They have no use for democracy. They have no use for labor unions. The corporation is the most monolithic, totalitarian, vicious behemoth on the planet. It's always been understood to be this way. Even Alexander Hamilton knew the threat a corporate structure of business would pose to the American Republic. All the founding fathers did. This has nothing to do with freedom, democracy, or freedom. We call ourselves a Christian nation. We need to follow godly ways and repent. And the whole bloody country is sitting in front of the tube watching a television show called Sex in the City. That's it. That's what the show's about. You know what? I have to tell you something, okay? I ain't no prude. All right? I ain't no prude. In my youth, I would have been called probably a muffa. All right? I ain't no prude. But why would anybody want to sit in front of a television? A television. A screen, a false screen, and watch Sex in the City. If you want to have sex in the city, I understand that. But to sit and watch other people on a two-dimensional electronic box having sex in the city is completely inadmissible to me as a virtue. It makes no sense. Why is it so important? You want to know why it's so important? Because there's nothing else more important to you. You know what's important to me? You know, I got a woman. I'm not a celibate. I'm not a monk. But you know, I read this in the Tax Administration, comparison of the reported tax liabilities of foreign and U.S. controlled corporations 1996 to 2000, report to the congressional requesters. This is what I read. Now I realize it's not Stephen King, but in a way it is. Because in it, these are some short notes from it, 63% of all U.S. companies used a variety of legal and some illegal methods to zero out their tax liability between 1996 and 2000. During the same period, 94% of U.S. corporations reported tax liabilities of less than 5%. 51% of U.S. multinational banks pay no income taxes since 1996. The largest multinational corporations that make enormous profits have already made deals. Levinson's office found 55 boxes of IRS records and almost 700 private agreements that the IRS had struck with multinational corporations on the way such price transfer arrangements could be a source of abuse or a source of not paying taxes between those years. In other words, they have the lawyers and the accountants, they go to the IRS, they work out a system whereby they do in fact make profits, but there's a price structure arrangement between the corporations and their subsidiaries so they cancel out paying any taxes. You know who's getting paid reparations over the Iraq War? The Iraqi people? No. Kuwait? No. Saudi Arabia? No. Halliburton, Exxon, Citicorp, Toys R Us, they're all receiving millions of dollars that the Iraqi people today are creating. If they sell a little bit of oil, it goes into a fund, but the corporations get the money first. Not the people of Iraq. Not our troops coming home, many of which end up on welfare. The money is being transferred directly from you, the taxpayer, to the United States government, to the Iraqi fund, where it is funneled back to the U.S. corporations that are so in need of it. Now, this is incredibly well known. All the time I go through the work I do, I have different press sources and documents that I go through on a regular basis. It's constantly this occurrence. Whoever's the head of a certain organization that's supposed to collect the funds in Iraq and disperse the funds to the Iraqi people, he resigns in protest, and you never hear about it. If you read a newspaper that's in Italian, translated into English, you'll hear about it. It'll be in the London Guardian or the Independent. It might even be in an Indian newspaper or Pakistani. It might be in Pravda, but it will not be in an American newspaper. Now, I'm not going to say that that's a conspiracy, because it makes perfect sense that the same giant monopoly corporations that own each other own the media. And who sits on the board of those corporations are the corporate CEOs and directors of other corporations. So it makes perfect sense that a corporate boardroom is going to decide that it's best not to report certain things in the American press that they own that would affect a member of the board that sits next to them. Makes perfect sense. I don't even see the necessity for a conspiracy, because why would the corporate world, why would they have to conspire with Washington to commit criminal acts when we're so damn stupid we don't know what's happening anyways? Why would they have to conspire? We don't know anything. We don't read anything. We haven't got a clue what's going on. You know how silly we are? That's the proper word. Americans are silly people. They're just silly. They actually think they know everything. And the dumber they are, the more arrogant they are. It's like a ratio. The more stupid they are, the more arrogant they are, and the more they think they know everything. If you think I'm wrong, hang around in any bar during election year and listen to the conversation. Especially in sports bars. They all think they know everything. I don't go out public, ever, anymore. I don't because the temptation is too great to enter into conversations with people, having conversations in restaurants and bars, lounges, and they say things that are so absurd that you just can't tolerate it. But you don't want to talk to them. So when you start learning something, for instance, some of you are going to actually go buy a book of mine or a paper, and you're going to read it, and you're going to say, aha. We call this the aha theory of understanding at Casey & Associates. You've learned a couple of things, and now you get the aha theory, and you want to share it. You want to share it with your neighbors and your friends. You want to tell them, so, have you heard about this? And you lay it out. And they go like this, they look at you and they go, fuck you. I don't want to hear that shit. The ball game's on. Oh shit. Sex in the City's on. Don't do it with your father. Don't do it with your mother. When your dad is home, sitting in his big old shorts, eating a bowl of ice cream, watching FBI reruns, don't go up to him and say, do you know what's going on with Halliburton in Iraq? He's not going to care. Your brother's not going to care. I have a client that's draft age. He has computer skills. He actually owns a small consulting business as a computer technician while he works in the computer field full time. He's single, he's intelligent, very large, healthy young man, draft age. He went to some of the young men that worked with him, and he started telling them about the draft. He cited the law, he cited the date, he cited that it was voted down to be voted on. It was tabled in committee. But right after the elections, there's a good chance it's going to be resurrected. If we get hit by a terrorist attack, it's almost certainly going to be immediately resurrected, and they'll institute the draft by no later than June of next year. You know what these people said to him? He didn't know what to say to them after that, because what they said to him was they looked at him and they went, wow, man, like, what are you going to do? What do you mean me? I'm talking about you guys. They have no concept that anything could change in their perfect little world. That's why Americans are so silly. They don't believe the change can happen to them. They don't believe, especially the progressive left. You know, the progressive left used to get mad at me on Pacifica Radio because I talked about George Bush Sr. as a family regime that goes back 3 decades, all the way back to Brown Brothers Harriman, when Prescott Bush and Averell Harriman were at Brown Brothers Harriman together, and they funded Adolf Hitler, Lenin, and later Stalin. And never stopped during the war. Prescott Bush, George Bush Sr.'s father. You know what the Pacifica Radio lefties said back in 1990 I was? They said I was a fascist, that I was a conspiracy theorist, that I was ridiculous, that I was an ultra-right conservative conspiracy theorist. I was trying to manipulate the minds of Pacifica Radio listeners and trying to recruit them into right-wing organizations. I swear to God, they said these things. They took votes at Pacifica Radio to have me banned off of Pacifica Radio because I was a right-wing conspiracy theorist and a fascist. Now that George Bush Jr. is in the White House, they don't have anything to say about me any longer. Nothing. Now that the corporations absolutely dominate the landscape, which was my argument why we went into the Persian Gulf in the first place, the first time, Persian Gulf won. The reason we had to go in and liberate Kuwait and make sure nothing could happen to Saudi Arabia is because they own billions of dollars in cash deposits in our banking system. And this has happened before. If we mess with Saudi Arabia, that's why we're not messing with Saudi Arabia or Kuwait. If we mess with either one of these two countries, they will yank their money out of American banks and put it in euros in Europe. They would bring our banking system down. This has been known in professional analytical realm for over 30 years. They've made the threat good many, many times. This isn't the first time. And the threat stands. We can't invade Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is us. We are Saudi Arabia. When you understand what I mean by we, I don't mean you and I. We, the American corporate system that's building a corporate global empire. They're part of it. They're not the antithesis to it. They're not a problem because they don't practice democracy and free enterprise. Why haven't they told you we have a problem with them not practicing democracy and free enterprise? They haven't, have they? They don't say that on Fox television, do they? They don't say Al Sabah and that family in Kuwait had a company named Santa Fe International out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, which learned slant drilling. Their technology was slant drilling. The Al Sabah family owned that corporation and was slant drilling into Iraq, stealing Saddam's oil. Both are socialist regimes. One's a religious regime, one was a secular regime. The religious regime of Kuwait was stealing oil from Saddam. Saddam said no more and went in and tried to take it back. Santa Fe International was that corporation. Why was I called a conspiracy theorist? Because Gerald Ford, Roderick Hills, Carla Hill's husband, Brent Scowcroft, sat on the board of directors of the wholly owned Santa Fe International, wholly owned Al Sabah Corporation. Roderick Hills was the husband of Carla Hills, George Bush Sr.'s trade representative. Gerald Ford was president of the United States and a 33rd degree Mason, right along with George Bush and the rest of these bozos. And of course, Brent Scowcroft was, at the time of the Iraq invasion of Kuwait in 1990, he was George Bush's national security advisor. Now, I wasn't saying a conspiracy existed. I called it corporate nepotism. I called it criminal. I called it wrong. I called it immoral. I called it sick. I called it corporatism. I never called it a conspiracy. Because if it was a conspiracy, how in the fuck would I have known about it? If it was a conspiracy, how the hell would I know about it? I'm talking about public record. Anybody can know this stuff. Learn how to do the research and analysis. Analysis is harder than research, but learn how to do it properly. And you could be standing up here yelling at people like I do. But because you're not doing it, I'm doing it. Until someone else will do it my way, not Noam Chomsky's way. When someone will do it my way, how many of you would want to go hear Noam Chomsky drone on for 3 hours about the linguistic factor the New York Times is reporting on Iraq? Talk about a sleeper. And I've read most of his books. They are sleepers.
Yeah, they are.
Gee. And would he ever think of saying a word that somebody on the street would recognize? Heavens to Betsy, no. Because he's Noam Chomsky, and he too wears those great big white basketball shoes to work at MIT every day. Because he wants to look like he's fashionable and one of the people. One of the people. Like John Kerry. Have you noticed that he doesn't even know how to do thumbs up? He does it like this. Because he doesn't know how to do it. It's like one of those Orange County Christian Republican evangelical women, when they flip you off, they go like this. That's not how it's done. Don't do it. If you don't know how to do it right, don't do it at all. See, you can know a lot about people by how they act and what they do. Not just what they say. Because often they'll be trained in what they say, like politicians, and they won't always say what they really want to say. But you can always tell what they mean when they jab at you like this, when they're talking, like George Bush does. And he jabs at you like that. He's like that guy in a bar who starts tapping you on your shoulder when he's telling you something. Okay? And you go, you really need to stop that. It tells you who George Bush is. He's a little punk-ass bitch. Okay? Frank, can you play this live on your show? No, I'm serious. I grew up like Frank did. In fact, I may have grown up worse than Frank. Frank grew up in what I understand was a pretty ugly household. I did as well. Except my father didn't have the courage to defend his own family. So my parents moved from Detroit, Michigan to Texas, north of Dallas. And we were born in Detroit. And I'm not going to talk about any ethnicity problems here, but we weren't exactly this perfectly white, Scottish, Irish-looking family as my father looked like. He was that part of the family. It was part of our other part of our family that was a little different. And when we moved to Texas, the Texas clans, they got it right away. Starting to be the fact that we were Yankees. And this is the early 60s. Well, my childhood was ugly because my dad was a coward. So I learned to fight in the streets of Texas to defend my family's honor, or what I thought was left of it. I didn't learn to fight by joining the military. When I got in the military, I thought military training, especially hand-to-hand combat, was just plain silly. It was ridiculous to me, and I wouldn't participate. They did that pugilism thing. Anybody know what a pugilism thing is? Okay? Somebody tell the audience what a pugilist stick is. It's got these big, rubbery, soft things on the end, right? And they whack each other with it. What they do is they get some guy 260 pounds with this stick, and get a guy 40 pounds in the ring with him, and just whack him on the head with it and knock him on his ass. You're supposed to teach him how to fight? I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I think you can court-martial my ass, but I ain't fighting nobody with that stick. You want to come over here and hit me with that stick, I'll fight you, but not with one of them damn sticks. So I faced court-martial twice in the military. So I don't have a problem that George Bush avoided Vietnam. I don't have a problem that John Kerry was no war hero. I protested the goddamn war in Vietnam the whole time it was going on, and I was there. I was in Vietnam protesting it. So, I don't have a problem that nobody wants to be drafted, nobody wants to go to Vietnam, and John Kerry was no damn war hero, okay? And his Purple Heart was because he got a little scratch on his arm, right here. And then he put himself in for his medals. As an officer, he put himself in for medals and the Purple Heart. Oh, please. Do you understand what that looks like? There were military guys who were active duty when he was there. He disgusted them. He was disgusting. He had a scratch on his arm. He'd put himself in for a Purple Heart and a Silver Star and go begging for the damn promotion. He was disgusting. He was a despicable little twerp. But does that mean that he's better or worse than George Bush? No, you still aren't following. They're all scumbags. We've lost the bloody, stinking country. It's over. On Frank's show, I was arguing vociferously one evening, and it occurred to me that what I was describing, and I later wrote a paper on it, called America's Postmodern Coup d'etat. I called it postmodern because if it was modern, we would all see it. There'd be blood in the streets, there'd be a tank in front of the White House with its barrel pointed, and we'd have a fat Yeltsin sitting on it waving to us. That's what a coup d'etat looks like in a modern world. Well, this is a postmodern America. We wouldn't recognize a coup d'etat if it happened to us. It just did. We've lost the country. It's been taken over by a foreign body of element, a religious movement, a fanatical, right-wing, lost their marbles, corporate-backed, whack jobs have taken over the White House and foreign policy. You know what they call Wolfowitz, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Douglas Feith, and about a half a dozen others. You know what they call them over the CIA and Defense Intelligence? The crazies. They call them the crazies. Because they are. They actually believe what they're doing. They actually do believe what they're doing. And that's what bothered me when I watched the interview with Christianity Today of George Bush, and when he was talking to some Amish people, the press interviewed him, and he said that he knew that God spoke through him. When he was interviewing Christianity Today, he constantly said that he wanted to let the Lord's light shine through him. And I thought, this kind of language is what comes after you've suffered a coup d'etat. Every totalitarian regime, I don't care if it's this old Soviet regime, Maoist regime, I don't care what it is, it has a religious flavor to it. It stinks of religion. Even if it's an atheist regime, because raw atheism on a large scale is a religion. It is a religion. That's why I'm also not an atheist. I'm not opposed to atheism, I'm not in favor of it. I don't care one way or the other. I mind my own business. But the atheists and the secularists and the religionists don't. And now there's something that has seized control of the White House, our foreign policy. It funds Congress and the Senate, and there will be no change. There will be no change. The Democrats aren't going to change it. The left isn't going to change it. The progressive left isn't going to change it. The Republicans are not going to change it. And there isn't going to be a revolution in my lifetime. So see, there's no good news, is there? You've lost the country, and I'm not going to tell you a lie, but there's some way, some clever way I've got for you to take it back. If I were to lie to you and say that, I would be no different than Nader, Amy Goodman on Pacifica Radio, Ralph Nader, Kerry, or Bush. I would be lying to you. And if I lied to you and made up something like that, you would never come to another lecture. In fact, if you thought I was doing that on Frank's show, you wouldn't have come here tonight. Would you? If you thought I actually had some platform, an agenda set up here where you could buy a book and sign a paper and we were going to submit it to the House and the Senate, we would change America to the revolution, right? If you thought that's who I was, would you have come here? I don't think so. Because I didn't give even the slightest impression that I'm interested in solutions. You want to know why? Not just because I don't have any. That's not the real reason. I don't believe there's enough of you in all of America to do it. I don't believe you can go out and get 10 other people to come to an event like this. I don't believe you can do it. I know some of you have tried. You can't do it. Most of you can't bring your spouse Your brother, your sister, your aunt, your uncle. Your father, your mother, your sister. You can't bring them. They won't come. And all of them have reasons. I know when we fly into Los Angeles, whether or not we're going to get an extra 100 people, when that jet starts setting down at Burbank, I just look out, I can just look out the window and go, ah, shit. It's sunny. That's it. That's all it takes. But there is something you can do about what I've just said. There is something you can do. You can become incredibly well-informed. Take responsibility as an adult for your own life. And if you have a spouse or close personal friends or children, you can then start doing something about your personal life. I can't give anybody in a general group like this advice. I have enough trouble taking my clients one-on-one and giving them advice on what they really ought to think about doing. But I never give them advice as if to say, here's what you need to do. Go here, do this, go here, do that. I tell them that this is what I would do if I were you in your situation. And it doesn't apply to a room full of people of such varied race, color, creed, ethnicity, male, female, gender, gays, lesbians. I don't care who's here, but it wouldn't apply to too many of you. There is no one thing. But there is one thing all of you can do. And that is really take what I'm saying seriously. And don't do this. Don't do this. I hate it when this happens. Don't leave here angry. Believe it or not, some of you you've got it all wrong. I'm not angry. Frank said he was angry. Maybe he was, I don't know. I'm not angry. I'm not angry tonight. I wasn't angry last week. I wasn't angry at the last of Frank's show when I called Bush a son of a bitch. I'm not angry. I don't get angry. Call this whatever you want, but I'm not angry. You wouldn't want to see me angry. I don't get angry anymore. What you need to do is not get angry, but get serious about changing your own lifestyle, your own expectations, your own ideas about what it is to live in a free country that's a free republic based on democratic principles that no longer exists. It doesn't exist. America no longer exists under that name, under that rubric, under that philosophy or way of life. It's gone. It's been gone for a long time. I moved out as far as I could, almost to Canada, but I didn't leave my country because I'm not one of those. That because things aren't turning out just like you wanted them to turn out, your first instinct, like the beasts in the woods, is flight or fright. Fight or flight. That's what animals do. They either run like hell or they stay and they fight. Your instincts are going to be, most of you, to run like hell. I've just said, of the 100 largest economies in the world, 51 are American and foreign multinational corporations. 45% of all trade in the world, all trade, is between Ford Motor Company of Detroit and Ford Motor Company of Bonn, Germany. Not between Germany and America, not between Americans, workers, and German workers. You're being cut out of the system. The left can't get it through their head because they still have this post-Marxist, post-modern belief system that they're socialists. They actually think they're socialists. Amy Goodman, Roy Tuckman, they would call themselves socialists. They're not socialists, they're Californians. You're not Marxist, you're Californian. And they're certainly not socialists when they work for a radio station. I don't care if they call it publicly owned or listener sponsored. They make money the same old-fashioned way. They get in the air, they shoot off their mouth, they pick up a paycheck and go home. They're not socialists. but because they hate the idea of capitalism, and their only interpretation of capitalism is free enterprise capitalism, they can't adjust their mind around the fact that this corporate system I'm talking about doesn't even need the United States government except for one facet. One thing it needs the United States government to do, and one thing it needs you to do. Go into your pockets and pay the military to go kill people that get in the corporate way. Not in the way of liberty, not because of Saddam Hussein, not in the way of Israel, not in the way of the Chinese government. You get in the way of the corporations that are building their empire. They need a foreign legion that's obedient, high-tech, and has no problem wiping people off the planet. That's all we are now, America. We are nothing but the tax base to fund the largest military force in galactic history to destroy anybody that fucks with GE, Halliburton, Exxon, Mobil, Chase Manhattan. You want to see a real war? You want to see a real war? You want to see our government go absolutely bloody well ballistic? Screw oil. Fuck with the banking system and see what happens. You go after Chase, Bank of America, Citicorp. You go after the largest banks in this world, and you're going to have a war. And whoever's responsible, you're dead. Because it's their money. It's not yours. If you want to start somewhere, you really ought to learn to understand corporatism, the corporate structure, not some lefty pamphlet by Howard Zinn, not some diatribe about, Marx's viewpoint of capitalism. Learn to try to understand multinational corporate governance and one other thing, banking. Understand what the dollar bill is in your wallet. Understand what electronic funds transfer at the point of sale ultimately means for your personal security. Understand this. The money issued in America was supposed to be issued by the Congress of the United States. It was supposed to be your money. It was supposed to be backed by your gold, your silver, held in trust to benefit you in a free republic. That disappeared in 1913. Any vestige of gold or silver backing, by 1964, it was all gone. But the money that you use, the thing that you use to buy and sell, it's not yours. To have $100,000 cash in a mattress, you are $100,000 in debt to the banking system. And anytime they want, they can take it. You mess with the bankers, they will send the tow truck. Every bank has a tow truck. If you buy a car from a bank, you use their money, borrow their money from the bank, and you go buy a brand new Lexus, you're going to tell me you don't realize that that banker has a tow truck? If you don't pay him? Well, I got news for you. There's a tow truck out there. It's called the IRS. It's the biggest goddamn tow truck on earth. You do anything to upset the corporate regime I'm talking about, they can wipe all of us out. They absolutely own your ass. You don't have credit. You don't have equity. You don't have shit. All of you are wrong. Every single one of you that does a balance sheet and you look at your wealth, you go to bed at night and you just go, oh, God, I'm worth $100,000. You're wrong. You ain't worth squat because it ain't your money. It's their money. The Federal Reserve that issues the money, the right to use a credit card, the Federal Reserve is owned by for-profit banks. That's who owns it. They own the stock of the Federal Reserve System. By keeping the United States government in debt, which means you and I, the government has to borrow from the Federal Reserve to pay its debt. It's called monetizing the debt. When they monetize the debt, that means they're taxing you. They're taking money from your pocket and giving it to the government, who then gives it to the corporate structure. But it's their government. It's their money. It's not yours. They're just letting you have the illusion of prosperity to keep you busy as little bees producing products and doing what you're told. And most importantly, paying your taxes. You've already lost the country. Who owns whatever is whoever owns the most gold. Throughout 6,000 years of written history, going back to Homer, every philosopher, every thinker worth his salt understood that who owns the gold owns everything. For gold is already changed. Gold isn't necessary in the new day. It's electronic now. We don't even need paper currencies and checks and money orders. It's all electronic. At some point, they want checks and money orders and cash done away with. The day that happens, all of you that are rushing out getting debit cards, credit cards, you're doing the banking thing electronically, you don't want to have that check in your pocket or money order, you don't want cash because you're afraid you might get robbed and somebody might get some of your stuff. You people are lost. The day that evolves to that point, you're finished. The day it evolves where everything is electronic and you're perfectly content with the convenience of it all. The convenience. That's Americans. They want to be convenient. They want to be stress-free. They want everything easy. They really don't want to work too hard. But if they work, they'd like to be paid on time and electronically. That's pretty cool. Because then I can just go in and wait. In some places, you can get a little chip under your skin, like in some of the resort communities in the Bahamas. And they'll read it right under your skin, a little Vera chip from Florida. And they'll read it just like a little credit card. You wouldn't even have to carry anything. You could run around nude, like Sex in the City, and still be able to buy and sell. Well, guess what else comes with that? What else do you think comes with that? Not just tracking people, tracking your fucking money. And who owns the money? The bank. Who's the bank's tow truck? The IRS. Now, do you actually think the IRS, when everything is electronic, when there's no cash, currency, no lag time between you sending in that payment, no more withholding at the employee level, at the employer's office, they aren't going to need it. Everybody will be in a database and it'll be automatic. And the money you owe the IRS will come out of your paycheck daily. Do you think they're going to do it quarterly? Think about it. Think about what they will be able to do. If they own all the money and everything's an electronic blip, they can audit you electronically, like that. They'll decide what you owe them on a daily basis, and you'll be paid accordingly. Have you ever been in a dispute with a bank? A real dispute with a bank. If you've been self-employed, you probably have. You don't often win, and if you do, it's not easy. Well, when this system finally gets in place, you're not going to win. You're going to learn to live with it. And guess what you're going to have to learn to live with? And not one of you has thought much about this. You're going to have to learn to live within your means. This is what your grandparents used to say, remember? Learn to live within your means, son. Don't be going out and buying things you can't afford. Live within your means. Somebody's going to make you live within your means. And not one of you in this room, I can just about guess, not one of you are actually living within your means. Most of you are bankrupt. Even those of you that don't even own a home, you're bankrupt. If you liquidated every single thing you've got, from your big-ass basketball shoes to your Lexus, gave up your TV, VCR, everything, if you sold it all, you couldn't pay your bills. You're in debt up to your eyeballs. You're not in credit. You're in debt. And you're in debt to the bankers who are pushing forward the electronic funds transfer system coupled with the Federal Reserve System that monetizes the federal deficit using the IRS to collect it. You know, when they do these old Asian Buddhist grandfatherly type mystic sages, they always try to tell you, that everything's connected? It is. It is. Everything's connected. What they're doing in Iraq is connected to us here. What Halliburton does next is connected. You and I will pay, one way or the other. We will all pay. Now, if you don't give a shit, your children will pay. Your children's children will pay. Your brother, your sister will pay. Somebody's going to pay. If the only concept you've got in your head right now is, how can I beat the system? I'm just going to tell you, you can't. Unless you're willing to risk going to jail. Now, I'm not saying that that's not a good decision. I'm not saying become a robber or a thief or a drug dealer or a prostitute. I'm saying these are options. But you'll be outside of the law. That's why they have that word called outlaw. You'll be outside of the law. So you can beat the system until you get caught, if you've got the stomach for it. If you've got the stomach for it. I know most of you probably came here anticipating, or maybe not anticipating anything, but maybe thinking that I was going to go on and on about Kerry and Bush and the elections, but by now you must understand, compared to what I've just outlined in such a brief way, do you actually believe Kerry or Bush could or would change the system to benefit you? Why would they do that? Who the hell are you? Why would they do that? They don't care about you. They're not Americans. Do you understand what I'm saying? They're part of a corporate system that Samuel P. Huntington referred to as dead souls. Samuel P. Huntington is one of them. He's one of them. He's a professor, sociology, political science. He wrote The Clash of Civilizations, first the article in Foreign Affairs, then the book, and he's been writing ever since about that subject over and over again. He just wrote an article in the National Interest that's going to be part of his new book that's coming out. An excerpt was in National Interest. And in it, he referred to these new men, this new breed of corporate elite. But they weren't just corporate, it was governmental, high-tech, banking, this new elite. He said they're not white-collar workers, they're not blue-collar workers. They call themselves gold-collar workers. And all they do is get on the Concorde and fly throughout the world, make deals about oil, copper, silver, banking, IMF, World Bank, Exim Bank, controlling governments like Iraq's debt and future, owning the world. They run the world. He says there's about 20 million of them now. In 10 years, there's going to be 40 million. He calls it gold-collar workers. And he says when they leave America, because most of them right now are Americans, when they leave America and they go do their work, whether it's academic, research, analysis, business, war, when they come back to America, they have no relationship with the American soil. They have no relationship with Americans. They have no relationship who lives here in this country. They refer to themselves as global citizens. Huntington referred to them as dead souls, putting his career on the line by calling them what I would call them. They're dead men. They don't care about anything. They don't care about humanity. They don't care about life. They have no moral, traditional, no kind of value system except to take, greed, money, power, materialism, raw materialism. That's their God. Money, mammon, is the God. And they already have it. They own it. They control it. Anything they want to do, they will do. Anybody that gets in the way, they'll take them out. I heard the argument this morning on Crossfire. Somebody made the argument that we had to take Saddam Hussein out, and the language was that he was an enemy of the United States. Now it's not that he was an imminent threat or a threat to the United States. Now they're saying he had to be taken out because he was an enemy of the United States. So is Fidel Castro. We've got a lot of people out there that hate America. Do you understand what they're saying? If you're an enemy of the United States, and then change your understanding of what it means by states. A nation state, a nation is a nation of people. Like the Native Americans up in Quinault, where I live, they have a system called the Nation of Quinault. The Quinault Nation is those people. And they have their own governing council that negotiates with the United States of government. Our United States, our governing system. The nation is the people. The state is the thing that governs the people. So when you talk about the United States, we're not talking about us. We're not talking about the United States. What they meant was when the United States was formed, it was the united group of 13, now 50 states, the states' government. The word nation doesn't appear. We as a nation don't exist. The only thing that exists is the states. And now the states are GE, Microsoft, Intel, Halliburton, Chase Manhattan. Those are the new states, the new governing bodies. And if you think I'm kidding, go to the internet, look up books under corporate governance, then go to those institutions that produce volumes on corporate governance, and you will see that they are in fact talking this way, privately, in their own books and journals, to themselves, amongst themselves, about the fact that the corporation is the new state. It will be the new governing body. It will decide who lives and who dies. It will decide who's president and senator. It will decide who's the governor. Do you actually believe Arnold Schwarzenegger is running the state of California? The minute he said he was going to run for office, who was standing next to him? The former Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of State, Undersecretary of the Treasury for Monetary Affairs, the CEO of Boeing, and before that, Bechtel, George fucking Shultz. That's who's running the state of California. That's who wanted to see him put in the governor's mansion. Now, the boys behind Shultz is, of course, the Bush family. He's always been one of the Bush babies. Always. So what we've got is George Bush's family and the Bush clan running the state of California, but they needed a front man that was acceptable to the silliest people in the world, the Californians. Because you are the silliest people I know. But it gets worse. I overheard little old ladies at a Rite Aid drugstore while I was in line to get my high blood pressure medicine. I can understand why I might need that. I heard two little old ladies say these words. I certainly hope we can get an Arnold Schwarzenegger here in Washington State. Little old ladies, like this big, really gray hair. Eastern Star. My husband was a Shriner. Mine too. Do you understand that there's a theory in philosophy that says people this stupid don't have a right to be free? Now, it isn't said quite exactly like that. But if you've read sufficient philosophy, Schopenhauer, Montaigne, Friedrich Nietzsche, Immanuel Kant, if you've read a little bit of philosophy, it's threaded throughout philosophy, all the way back to Confucian philosophy. People as stupid as Americans have no longer a right to be free. I'm not saying they deserve to die. I'm not even saying they deserve to be enslaved. Philosophy just simply says, if you're that stupid, that's what happens to you. Now, really smart people get dead too, under dictatorships. I've quoted in some of my press releases and in one or two of my recent papers, I've quoted now all over my press releases when I'm talking about the Iraq War, when I talk about the upcoming draft, when I talk about the system of checks and balances that we no longer have. There's a Cuban journalist that was quoted in Foreign Affairs And he said, I think, was a very brilliant thing. Because he said it to a reporter who reported in Foreign Affairs, his comments, and he was currently in jail. And he said, sometimes the only place a decent man can be is in prison. The only place a decent man can be is often in prison. Do you understand what I'm saying? Most of you don't. A decent man would choose not to live under this regime here in America, would choose not to live under this regime, participate in it, and not dissent, not speak out, not try to do something about it. A decent person would do something about it. Not just figure out a way to make money and then run away. He would try to figure out a way to do something. And if at some point, look, I hate this part when we get this far in here. I am not a hero or a fucking martyr. Okay? I carry a gun, I carry a knife. When I get my keys and I put them in my car, my keychain has a Kubotan on it. I'm not going to go easy, okay? I know that there's people out there like the Bush administration that have, in fact, years ago contacted my office through General George Keegan and told me to back off because they can push back. All I did was collect all my latest papers and books up, put them in a box, and send them straight to the fucking White House. You want me? Come on. They're doing it to people all the time. They did it to Bill Maher, who demonstrated zero backbone. Zero backbone. Because he wanted another show. Okay, they got him off politically incorrect. He just wanted another show. So he's gone under the entertainment critique of Bush. That's what Crossfire is. When they talk about Bush and Kerry, it's entertainment, it's jokes. The two that are debating are joking back and forth. I used to have a client I no longer have, and he used to come to all my lectures and roundtables. And he used to say, Craig, you ought to collect all those anecdotes and things you say because they're pretty funny. And you could go like on one of those Comedy Central stand-up things, you got like 30 minutes, a comedy routine, you'd make a ton of money because that's pretty fucking funny stuff. And I looked at him and I said, John, I suppose I could do that, but I don't really think any of this is fucking funny. I really don't. I don't understand why nobody will try to figure out a way to get on Bill O'Reilly and then bitch slap that son of a bitch. I really don't understand why. And I'm not lying. I got clients that'll back me up. I'll have them all raise their hands if you'd like so you can see them. They're all in this room. They raised the money for me. We put up thousands of dollars. I'm going to give you the specific numbers because it's a little embarrassing. But my client base put up a whole bunch of money to hire 2 different publicity agents that were known to Hollywood, the media, and the news industry. We bombarded them. Professional PR firms bombarded them for a year solid to get me on O'Reilly, Hannity, any of these shows. I wanted O'Reilly. And the deal was made with one client separate that no matter when the date was scheduled, it would be live. I wasn't going to do the show on a screen so he could hit the mute button and then talk over me while I'm going like this. It makes O'Reilly look like he's whooping ass. You know, the sheriff calls himself, I'm like the sheriff. I go in and I clean up towns. See, I want in the studio with him, dressed up in a nice suit and tie. I lose a little bit more weight, clean it up, maybe take the beard off, show up. I get some thick Coke bottle looking glasses. Just sit there like, look like a doofus. And then tell it exactly what I thought of it. And then when he came at me, I'd knock him on his ass. Somebody needs to bitch slap this man. Hannity needs to be taken on straight up, mano on mano. Because they're getting away with murder right now. They're beating the hell out of people and begging movie stars to come on their show. so they can beat them up. Cher is out campaigning. Cher is out campaigning. Have you seen the stuff they're doing on O'Reilly where they're showing, the Kennedy niece, or, she's out campaigning for Kerry, and then they show Cher. The only clip they seem to have of Cher is her semi-nude dancing with a bunch of other people, right? Well, it's not their fault. It's not just taking a cheap shot at Cher. There is no other scene of Cher, not semi-nude, singing. She's not political. She's never been political. I know. I met her. I sat in her condo with Sean Penn, and we talked to her. The only comment she said, one comment in a 45-minute meeting with her, as we stressed the need to get money behind a movement to change the country before it was too late. All she could think of was to say this about George Bush Sr. Don't they know that sometimes just enough is enough? Money. Money. Here's a woman that owns 28 houses. And she's going to campaign for Kerry on the basis that George Bush Jr. doesn't know when enough is enough about money? But she has a right to speak. She has a right to speak. But you understand, they're allowing her to speak. She's becoming that spokesman because they will not allow on Sean Hannity's show or whatever that other guy's name is. What's the...
Alan Colmes.
I don't know who that one is either. See, I don't have TV, so I don't know. I learned these names by being at the hotel room. Bill O'Reilly really bothers me. And then there's another guy, Christopher something, I'm not sure. But they yell and scream at you. They don't allow you to speak, and as soon as you start to answer the question, they cut loose a diatribe. And I watched him just beat up 2 professors this morning. He was a physicist and a professor, and he was denouncing the war because he's also a Catholic and a Christian, and he thought that the war was unjust, and he was trying to make his just war argument. He knows these little crooked glasses and bald head, little bitty guy like this. And as soon as he started speaking, well, I think the just war doctrine is it was pushed forward, and then O'Reilly would just blast him out of the water. And it looked like O'Reilly was the only intelligent person speaking, that these 2 other inarticulate doofuses couldn't swing it. They couldn't. Why do you think they pick them? Now see, I'm not lying to you. Every single one of you, when you go home, email and write Bill O'Reilly's ass and tell him you should put Craig Hewlett on. I'm serious. We have 2 PR firms. Kathy does it all the time. That's all we do is bombard them. They know who I am. They know the name of the book. They all got a copy of the book free. Over 150 copies of The Hydra went to everybody at Fox, at BBC, all over the place. 2 went to O'Reilly. I sent him one, separate. But he won't. He can't. Because he knows what would happen. Because, let me point something out that Kathy pointed out for me this morning. There's another reason, only this reason, why Cher is saying anything political. She's retired. She's retired. So it can't hurt her career. That's the only reason she's speaking out. She's known about all of these kinds of issues for over a decade. I met with her in 1991. She got copies of all the tapes, interviews, books, papers that we published up to that date. But she's not going to say anything then. She had a career. In fact, that's what interrupted our meeting. She had rehearsal with her girlfriends. So see, in my opinion, we've already lost the battle. We've already lost the war part of it. All that's left is for me to try to give you a clear grasp of the understanding of what the problem is. The problematic, the Noam Chomskyan essential problematic. You need to understand the essential problematic. Because otherwise you can't do shit. You don't understand what the problem is yet. When you do, you have to grow up. That's the next step. You have to grow up. You have to become a grown-up. And I'm going to have to say something here before I take a break. I'm sorry if some of this comes off a little rude, but I'm out of time. Not tonight. I'm out of time. I'm not getting old. I am old. I know how much time I got left. I ain't got 20 years to be doing this. I don't want to be doing this 20 years from now. Shit, I don't want to live to be 70. What a drag. Live to 70, be in a hospital with tubes up your nose and tubes coming out of you? On a welfare and a medical system as corrupt as ours is going to be by then? I just got out of the hospital. And I talked my way out of there fast. I couldn't stand the odor. The disinfectant, the bleach, and the urine standing around in different parts of the building. So, before I'll go back to one of those places long term, I'll take care of this thing. No, I'm not going to be here for long. I don't have the time for this. I only have enough time left on planet Earth to give you what I believe is the correct view of what's happened to our country. Not a view on how to fix it. That's up to you. You have to fix it. You have to fix it in your own life, and you have to grow up about what's going on. Now, let me be very clear what I mean about grow up. One of the other things I saw this morning on TV was a young woman got shot by what they refer to as a non-lethal bullet in Boston. But here's my real question. That's bad enough that they created weapons that'll kill people that they call non-lethal bullets. I know all the technology. I'm a weapons expert and fan still to this day. I got a ton of weapons. That's what I was trained in. I know what they are. But that wasn't my problem. You know what my problem was? What's wrong with these people in Boston? Who gives a shit that the Boston Red Sox won? Who gives a flying fuck that some baseball team won? That you'd go out in the streets drunk, raise hell, and turn cars over? When did sports become so goddamn important that while all this was going on, the sports, Sex in the City, and all the rest of it's going on, these men have quietly taken your country away. It's gone while you were watching football, Friends, and Oprah. All you care about is your big dumb ass, your car, your shoes, your goddamn important shoes. That's it. That's what you care about. So guess what? And this is true. And it's always been true throughout history, and it's true today. You're not going to like it. But you, in fact, do, in the end, always get what you deserve. So don't blame me or come back to my next lecture or call my office when you get fired or when you retire and IT&T or Intel says what they're saying to everyone these days. $65, you're a fool. You're a fool if you think you can live on Social Security 15, 20 years from now and live on it. You can't. I just had a doctor inform me that the first ever gallbladder was removed in Bangladesh, India. And a doctor did it from New York. Machines did it. They call it telesurgery. Now, do you think for a minute George Shultz or George Bush is going to go under the knife through telesurgery? No. They already got the real doctors. Your future is going to get a whole lot more bleak than it is now. So you really need to, change some things and view it a little bit differently. And the best I can do is, do another one of these, but in this case, I'm going to go take a break so Kathy can beg and plead and whimper and whine and complain that you're not buying enough books or papers or tapes because she's got to pay the bloody bills that we create while we do this. So I'm going to go take a break, and I won't come back, and if you're still here, which will be very surprising, then I'll take some questions. Thank you.
I don't want to single you out, but a woman just came up to me and asked me about someone that I played on my show, and I can't find her. Right here. There you go. It's Ben Harper is the guy that I played. anything by Ben Harper. The guitars were still, the jury's still out. We're trying to figure out who it is. Okay, I just want to take a moment and invite you all to consider, if you're not, invite you to consider what it means to become a client of Craig's. You heard him mention it a little bit during his talk, and I'm not about to try to, in my words, tell you what it is, but if you have any interest at all, there's a round table tomorrow. Craig's clients meet in a few different cities throughout the U.S. Throughout the year, and Craig, as he said, consults them. If you have a business or private interest, the best person to do your questions, if you want to inquire about it, would be Kathy at the end. Kathy's in the back in the beige shawl. If you want to find out more about how to become a client of Craig's, I would highly tell you it's time and energy well spent. What do I want to say? I'll say this very briefly. I have all of Craig's books. And as a good intentioned guy that wants to be informed, I've actually sat and flipped through them. They're not an easy read. Years ago I caught flack. Remember when the Celestine prophecy was big? I don't want to offend anybody here, but I heard the big hype about the Celestine prophecy. You'd be out, and everywhere you'd see somebody with a copy of it, and they're talking about it. And I eventually picked one up. I made the big mistake of saying, not only did I not like it, but I said it on my program. And I actually got an email last week that was left over from how many years ago? 10 years ago. I remember when you said you didn't like the Celestine prophecy. And what do you know about books? Well, I know what I appreciate and what I don't. I know what I like and what I don't. I know what's an important book to have in your possession and what's not. And if you haven't picked up the Hydra that Craig makes reference to, you need to have that in your house. You need to acquaint yourself with it and a lot of the information. So if you haven't picked it up, there's plenty in the back. And I'm not going to give you the push or the hard sell. It's an important book to have in your house.